I wasn't looking for another woman. That's the first thing you need to understand. I was actively, vehemently, not looking. My heart felt like a shattered teacup, glued back together with desperation and cheap superglue, and the last thing I needed was for someone to test its integrity. So I ran. I ran back to the one place that had always felt like a fortress, my childhood home. A place of floral wallpaper, the scent of lemon polish, and the comforting, predictable rhythm of my mother's life. I was 28, a refugee from a life I'd painstakingly built in the city, now hiding out in my teenage bedroom, staring at faded band posters and the ghosts of who I used to be. My breakup with Sasha had been a demolition. She hadn't just left, she'd taken the studs and the wiring with her, leaving me in a pile of emotional rubble. My mother, in her infinite, gentle wisdom, didn't ask questions. She just made me soup and told me the guest room was mine for as long as I needed. It wasn't a guest room, it was my room, frozen in amber. The air was thick with the dust of my past selves, a past that felt impossibly distant. "Ilara, honey, Lena's coming by this afternoon to help with the roses," my mom called from the hallway, her voice muffled by the closed door. "She's a miracle worker with those blighted things." I grunted a non-committal reply. Lena. The name was vaguely familiar, one of the revolving cast of my mother's book club friends or garden club associates. I pictured a woman in her late 60s with a floral sun hat and orthopedic sandals. Fine. I could handle that. I could be polite and then retreat back into my cave of melancholy. I had it all planned out. I would be a ghost in this house, haunting the hallways until my own spirit decided to rematerialize. The plan, like every plan I'd made in the last 6 months, was about to be obliterated. When the doorbell rang, I stayed put, burrowed under my duvet. I heard my mom's cheerful greeting, followed by a voice that was not what I expected. It was lower, smoother, like honey warmed by the sun. It held a quiet amusement that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. Curiosity, a long-dormant creature, stirred in my gut. Against my better judgment, I swung my legs out of bed and crept to the door, cracking it open just enough to see down the hallway to the front door. And there she was. She wasn't in her late 60s. She was maybe 40, if that, with dark hair pulled back in a loose, practical knot that failed to contain a few stray curls around her face. She wore a simple gray t-shirt and worn jeans that hugged her hips. She was holding a pair of gardening gloves, and when she laughed at something my mother said, the sound was rich and genuine. It wasn't a polite titter, it was a full, throaty laugh that seemed to fill the whole house. My carefully constructed wall of apathy developed a hairline crack. She turned her head slightly, and I saw her profile, a strong jaw, a straight nose, and an expression of such serene competence that I felt an immediate, irrational spike of irritation. It was the calm of a woman who had her life figured out, a stark contrast to the chaotic mess of my own. I hated her instantly. And my heart, that traitorous, glued-together thing, gave a painful, unmistakable lurch. I slammed my door shut, the click echoing in the sudden silence of my room. So much for being a ghost. My strategy of avoidance worked for approximately 3 hours. I could hear them outside, the murmur of their voices punctuated by the metallic snip of pruning shears. I tried to lose myself in a book, but Lena's laugh kept drifting through the open window, a warm, unwelcome sound that snagged my attention. It was infuriating. I was supposed to be marinating in my misery, not being distracted by my mother's ridiculously attractive gardener friend. Finally, defeated, I decided to risk a trip to the kitchen for water. I timed it for a lull in the conversation, creeping down the stairs like a cat burglar. I was filling a glass at the sink when the back door slid open. "Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to startle you." Lena stood there, framed by the blinding afternoon sun. She wiped a sheen of sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist, leaving a faint smudge of dirt on her temple. Up close, I could see the fine lines around her eyes, crinkling in a way that suggested she smiled often. Her eyes were the color of moss after a rainstorm. "You must be Ilara. Your mom has told me so much about you." "Has she?" I said, my tone flatter than I intended. I took a long sip of water, using the glass as a shield. She didn't seem to notice my chilliness. Or if she did, she didn't care. She's very proud of your work. The gallery stuff. Sounds incredible. Her gaze was direct, unwavering, and it made me feel like a bug under a microscope. Sasha had looked at me like that once, with an intensity that felt like adoration until it felt like possession. It's just a job, I mumbled, turning to put the glass in the dishwasher. Few people get to have a job they're passionate about. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. The movement stretched the fabric of her t-shirt across her chest and shoulders. She was solid. Grounded. Everything I wasn't. It's a gift. Or a curse, I muttered, unable to stop the bitterness from seeping out. A flicker of something, understanding, maybe, passed through her eyes. Yeah, she said, her voice softer now. It can be that, too. She didn't push. She just held my gaze for a moment longer before nodding toward the garden. Well, I should get back to those aphids. They're not going to vanquish themselves. She gave me a small, crooked smile and disappeared back into the sunlight, leaving behind the faint, clean scent of crushed leaves and something else, something warm and uniquely her. I stood there for a full minute, my hand on the dishwasher door, my heart hammering against my ribs. The irritation was still there, but now it was tangled up with something else, something dangerous and terrifyingly familiar. Yearning. The next few days fell into a pattern. Lena was a constant, quiet presence. She wasn't just helping with the roses, she was helping my mother repot the ferns, mend a section of broken fence, and organize the garage. And I was always there, a sullen satellite in her orbit. I'd watch her from my window, my book forgotten in my lap. I studied the efficient way she moved, the patience in her hands as she coaxed a stubborn root from the earth. I noticed the way she'd listen to my mother, truly listen, with her head tilted and a look of deep concentration. She never offered unsolicited advice. She just listened and occasionally asked a question that would gently guide my mom to her own solution. It was a skill I'd never mastered. My relationship with Sasha had been a constant battle of wills, a cacophony of two people trying to talk over each other. The forced proximity was becoming unbearable. I felt hyper-aware of her, of the space she took up in the house, of the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. My mom, blissfully oblivious, would insist I join them for iced tea on the porch. I'd sit there, stiff and silent, while they talked about soil pH and neighborhood gossip. I would answer in monosyllables, my eyes fixed on a point in the distance, all while my senses were screaming. I knew the scent of her sunscreen. I knew the rhythm of her breathing. I knew that when she was thinking, she'd lightly tap her thumb against her mug. These details collected in my mind like contraband, precious and forbidden. The twist, the moment the universe decided my self-imposed exile was over, came on a Tuesday. It was humid and overcast, the air heavy with the promise of a storm. I'd decided to tackle the boxes of my old things my mom had stored in the attic, a form of self-flagellation I felt I deserved. After an hour of choking on dust and memories, I retreated to my room, sticky with sweat and grime. I stripped off my shirt and jeans, tossing them onto the floor. I was standing in my bra and underwear, rummaging through my drawers for something clean, when my bedroom door opened without a knock. Lena stood in the doorway, holding a folded pile of laundry. Your mom asked me to bring this up. Her voice trailed off as she took in the scene. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise, and then, nothing. No embarrassment. No hasty apology and retreat. She just stood there, her gaze dropping from my face, over my shoulders, my torso, down to my bare legs, and then back up to my eyes. It wasn't a leer. It wasn't predatory. It was observational. A calm, neutral assessment. And in that moment, I was more exposed than I had ever been in my life. Every scar, every stretch mark, every imperfection I tried so hard to hide felt illuminated. My first instinct was to scream, to cover myself, to slam the door in her face. But I was frozen, pinned by her quiet, unreadable gaze. Sorry, she said finally, her voice even. The door was ajar. I should have knocked. She took a step into the room, not out. My heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. She placed the clean laundry on the foot of my bed. You've got a smudge of something on your back. Here. Before I could process what was happening, she was behind me. I flinched as her fingers, cool and slightly calloused, brushed against my skin just below my shoulder blade. I expected a quick, cursory wipe. But her touch lingered. Her thumb moved in a slow, deliberate circle, gently rubbing away the dirt. Every nerve ending in my body went on high alert. I could feel the warmth of her body behind me, could smell that scent of earth and clean laundry and Lena. It was intoxicating. I stopped breathing. There, she said softly, her voice close to my ear. Her hand dropped away, but I could still feel the ghost of her touch, a brand on my skin. I stood rigid, my back to her, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I couldn't turn around. I couldn't speak. I heard her take a step back. I'll let you get changed, she said. Her voice had a new texture to it, a slight roughness. I heard her walk to the door, heard it click softly shut. Only then did I let out the breath I was holding, sinking onto the edge of my bed. The clean clothes she'd brought sat in a neat pile, smelling of lavender and fabric softener. My room, my sanctuary, no longer felt safe. It felt charged, alive, humming with a new and terrifying energy. The storm had finally broken, not outside, but right here, inside the four walls of my childhood bedroom. After the incident, a fragile truce settled between us. The air was still thick with unspoken things, but the hostility on my end had dissolved, replaced by a wary, trembling curiosity. I couldn't look at her without remembering the feeling of her thumb on my skin, a slow, deliberate circle that had somehow redrawn the map of my body. The next day, I found her in the garden, on her knees, wrestling with a particularly stubborn patch of weeds that had choked a bed of peonies. I watched her for a moment from the kitchen window before taking a deep breath and walking outside. Need a hand? I asked, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet afternoon. She looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun. A real smile touched her lips, reaching her moss-green eyes. I'm not going to say no, she gestured to a patch next to her. If you're not afraid to get your hands dirty. I knelt in the dirt beside her, the damp soil cool against my knees. For a while we worked in silence, a comfortable rhythm of pulling and tossing. The shared, simple task was a balm. It was easier than talking. My mom says you're a landscape architect, I said finally, yanking a dandelion out by its root. I am, she confirmed. Used to have a business partner. A firm. We did big corporate campuses, fancy rooftop gardens. The whole 9 yards. Used to. She paused, her hands still in the dirt. We had a difference of opinion on the direction of the business. And on a few other things. She sighed, a small, quiet sound. She was my partner in every sense of the word. When we broke up, the business broke up too. It got messy. I lost a lot. She looked at me then, her gaze clear and direct. So I came back here. Started over. Smaller. Just me and the dirt. My throat felt tight. Her story was a mirror, a slightly different version of my own. Sasha and I had owned the gallery together. The breakup had meant not just the loss of a partner, but the loss of my career, my creation. Lena's quiet confession was a gift. She wasn't the unflappable, perfect woman I had imagined. She was a survivor just like me. She had her own rubble. I get that, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The losing a lot part. She nodded, a deep understanding in her eyes that needed no further words. It takes a while for the ground to feel solid again, doesn't it? I'm still waiting for it to stop shaking, I admitted. It was the most honest thing I'd said to anyone in months. She reached over and gently brushed a stray leaf from my hair. Her fingers were warm, and the brief contact sent a jolt straight through me. It will, she said softly. You just have to give it time. And be patient with the new growth, she gestured to the peonies we had just freed. Sometimes the most beautiful things need a little help clearing out the weeds. The following week, the garden became our space. We fell into an easy routine, meeting there in the late afternoons when the heat of the day began to fade. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just worked, the silence punctuated by the snip of shears and the thud of discarded weeds. But the silence was different now. It was full, not empty. It was a space where we could just be, without the pressure of performance. Lena taught me things. She showed me how to tell the difference between a sucker and a new cane on a rose bush, her hand briefly covering mine to guide the clippers. The warmth of her palm against the back of my hand was electric, and I had to consciously focus on my breathing to keep it even. "You're a natural," she said one afternoon, watching me carefully deadhead a cluster of spent blooms. "I had a good teacher," I replied, daring to meet her eyes. A faint blush crept up her neck. "It's mostly just paying attention. Noticing what the plant needs." Her words hung in the air between us. It wasn't just about the plants anymore, and we both knew it. She was paying attention to me. She noticed when I was having a bad day, when the ghosts of my past were particularly loud. On those days, she wouldn't push me to talk. Instead, she'd find a simple, grounding task for us to do, turning the compost, watering the seedlings. She was tending to me as carefully as she tended to her roses. The turn happened on a Thursday. A real storm had finally rolled in, a dramatic summer downpour that forced us inside. We were in the kitchen, soaked and laughing, shaking rain from our hair like dogs. My mom had gone out for her book club, leaving us alone in the house. "I'll make some tea," Lena said, heading for the kettle. I stood there, dripping on the linoleum, watching her. The rain had plastered her dark curls to her temples and neck. Her gray t-shirt was soaked, clinging to her shoulders and back. I could see the faint outline of her bra strap through the damp fabric. My throat went dry. All the careful walls I had rebuilt, all the rationalizations and defenses, crumbled to dust. The raw, undeniable force of my attraction to her hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, though she was, devastatingly so. It was the quiet strength in her, the patience in her hands, the kindness in her eyes. It was the way she saw the mess I was and wasn't scared away. In fact, she'd walked right into it, knelt beside me in the dirt, and helped me start clearing the weeds. She turned from the counter, 2 mugs in her hands, and she must have seen it on my face. The raw, unguarded wanting. Her steps faltered. The easy smile on her face faded, replaced by an expression of intense, focused stillness. She put the mugs down on the table, her movements slow and deliberate. The only sounds in the room were the drumming of the rain against the window panes and the frantic thumping of my own heart. She took a step toward me. Then another. She stopped when there was barely a foot of space between us. "Ilara," she whispered, and my name on her lips was both a question and a prayer. I couldn't speak. I could only look at her, all my fear and longing and hope laid bare in my eyes. She slowly lifted her hand, not to my face, but to a damp strand of my hair that had stuck to my cheek. She gently tucked it behind my ear, her fingers brushing against my skin. The touch was feather-light, but it seared a path straight to my core. Her eyes searched mine, looking for something, permission, maybe. Or a sign to run. I didn't run. I leaned into her touch, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. It was all the answer she needed. The air between us crackled, thick and heavy with everything we hadn't said. This was the point of no return. The moment stretched, taut and shimmering. Lena's hand lingered by my cheek, her thumb stroking my jawline, a slow, hypnotic rhythm that made my knees feel weak. Her gaze held mine, and in the deep green of her eyes, I saw my own longing reflected. The world narrowed to this small space in my mother's kitchen, the scent of rain and damp earth and her. It was terrifying. It was exquisite. Every part of me was screaming to close the distance, to finally feel her lips on mine, but I was paralyzed by a lifetime of caution and a fresh, gaping wound from the last time I'd been this vulnerable. "You're trembling," she murmured, her voice a low vibration that I felt more than heard. "I'm scared," I breathed, the confession slipping out before I could stop it. I know. Her expression softened, a wave of tenderness washing over her features. "Me too." That was the last thing I expected to hear. That this calm, capable woman could be scared of this of me. It cracked open the final, brittle shell around my heart. The tension in the room didn't break, but it shifted, deepening into something more than just desire. It became a shared vulnerability, a mutual precipice. She started to lean in, her eyes fluttering shut, and my own lips parted in anticipation. The phone on the kitchen counter shrieked, a jarring, violent intrusion. We both jumped back as if electrocuted, the spell shattered. My sister's name flashed on the screen. I snatched it up, turning away from Lena, my hand shaking. "Hey, Chloe." "Ilara." "Thank God. I've been trying you. Are you okay?" "I just heard from Mark that Sasha is clearing out the gallery." "Like, everything? Your sculptures, the inventory, all of it. He said she has a U-Haul." The floor dropped out from under me. "What?" "No, she can't. We had an agreement." "Well, you know Sasha's agreements," Chloe said, her voice laced with a familiar, weary cynicism. "She's telling people the business is dissolved and she's liquidating the assets." "Your assets? You have to do something." Ice flooded my veins. "The sculptures. My work. Years of my life, my soul poured into clay and metal. Sasha knew what they meant to me. This wasn't business, it was cruelty. It was a final, devastating blow designed to bring me to my knees. The air rushed out of my lungs. I sank onto a kitchen chair, the phone pressed hard against my ear, the world tilting on its axis. I was vaguely aware of Lena moving, of a warm hand on my back, but I couldn't process it. All I could see was Sasha's triumphant smirk, the way she looked when she knew she'd won. The old panic, the feeling of being small and powerless, clawed its way up my throat. I can't," I stammered into the phone. "I can't deal with her. Not again." I hung up, dropping the phone onto the table with a clatter. I buried my face in my hands, my shoulders shaking. The almost kiss, the tender moment with Lena, it all evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard reality of my past. This was why I couldn't have this. This was why I couldn't let someone in. Because the moment I did, the world found a way to remind me of how easily I could be broken. A mug of steaming tea was placed gently on the table in front of me. Lena knelt beside my chair, not touching me, but her presence was a solid, warm anchor in the swirling chaos of my mind. "Ilara. Breathe," she said, her voice calm and steady. "Just breathe with me." I looked at her, my vision blurred with unshed tears. "You don't understand. She's erasing me." "No, she's not," Lena said, her gaze fierce, protective. "She's throwing a tantrum. She's trying to hurt you because she knows she's lost you. This isn't about the art. It's about power. Don't give her any more of yours." Her words cut through the panic. She was right. This was Sasha's signature move. A scorched earth campaign to punish me for leaving. But hearing it from Lena, from someone who had walked her own path of fire and survived, it landed differently. "What do I do?" I whispered. "First," she said, pushing the mug closer to my hands. "You drink this." Then she stood up, her jaw set with a determination that sent a shockwave of strength through me. She picked up my phone, found a number, and held it out to me. "Then you call a lawyer. I have a good one. Her name is Anya. She helped me when my life went to hell." And then, she looked me straight in the eye, her voice dropping, becoming intimate again. "You let me stay. You don't push me away. Not tonight." My breath hitched. It was a command, but it felt like a plea. It was a choice. I could retreat back into my cave, let the ghosts of the past win. Or I could take the hand that was being offered. I looked from the phone to her face, to the unwavering strength and terrifying vulnerability in her eyes. I took the phone. And then I reached out my other hand, and laced my fingers through hers. Her hand was warm and strong, her grip firm and sure. "Okay," I whispered. The phone call to the lawyer was a blur. Lena stood by me the whole time, her hand a constant, grounding pressure in mine. She made notes, asked questions I was too overwhelmed to think of, and by the end of it, a plan, a fragile, tentative plan, was in place. An injunction would be filed in the morning. Sasha couldn't legally sell my work. It wasn't a victory, but it was a stay of execution. It was a foothold. When I hung up, the adrenaline drained away, leaving me utterly exhausted, hollowed out. Lena led me from the kitchen, her arm now around my waist, supporting me. She didn't lead me to my room. She led me to the living room, where a low fire was crackling in the hearth. She must have started it while I was on the phone. She sat me down on the thick rug in front of it and disappeared for a moment, returning with 2 blankets. She wrapped one around my shoulders and then sat down beside me, close enough that our legs were touching. We sat in silence, watching the flames dance. The storm outside had softened to a gentle, rhythmic patter against the windows. The firelight cast flickering shadows on Lena's face, highlighting the strong line of her jaw, the softness of her mouth. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. "You don't have to thank me," she replied, her eyes on the fire. "I told you." "I get it," she paused, then turned to face me fully. "Ilara, what happened in the kitchen before the phone rang, that wasn't just about the rain?" My heart started hammering again. "I know. I've wanted to kiss you since the day I first saw you, standing at the top of the stairs looking like a startled deer," she confessed, a small, wry smile playing on her lips. "I've spent the last 3 weeks telling myself 100 reasons why it was a terrible idea. You were hurting. You were my friend's daughter. You were just out of something awful. I told myself to be patient. To just be your friend," she sighed, her smile fading. "I'm not a very patient person." "Lena," I started, but I didn't know what to say. She reached out and cupped my face, her palm warm against my skin. Her thumb stroked my cheek, a gesture so full of tenderness it made my throat ache. "I'm not going to kiss you now," she said softly. "Not like this. Not when you're reeling." "That wouldn't be fair." My heart sank, but she wasn't finished. "But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. Unless you tell me to go. Right now. If you tell me to leave, I will walk out that door, and I will go back to being your mom's friend who helps with the roses. Just say the word." This was it. The final wall. The choice laid bare. All my fear, all my pride, all the scar tissue from Sasha screamed at me to say the word. To choose safety. To choose the familiar loneliness over the terrifying risk of hope. I looked into her eyes, into their mossy green depths, and I saw a home I hadn't even known I was looking for. I saw a strength that wasn't about power but about resilience. I saw a woman who wasn't trying to fix me, but was willing to sit with me in the dark until I was ready to find the light. I leaned forward and pressed my forehead against hers. I closed my eyes, breathing in her scent, earth and rain and fire. "Don't go," I whispered. A shudder went through her entire body. A quiet, relieved exhale brushed against my lips. She didn't kiss me. She just held me, her arms wrapping around me, pulling me against her chest. I buried my face in the crook of her neck, my own arms wrapping tightly around her waist, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt the ground beneath me settle. I wasn't fixed. I wasn't healed. But I wasn't alone. And in the warm, quiet dark, with the fire crackling and the rain falling, that felt like everything. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in blankets and each other, until the fire burned down to glowing embers. Lena's presence was a quiet miracle. She didn't fill the silence with platitudes or promises. She just held me, her steady heartbeat a comforting rhythm against my ear. When I finally stirred, my limbs stiff, she loosened her hold but didn't let go completely. "We should get you to bed," she said, her voice husky with sleep. I looked around the dim room, at the dying fire and the rain-streaked windows. The thought of going back to my room, to my cold, empty bed, was unbearable. "Stay," I said, the word barely a whisper. It wasn't a question. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine in the gloom. She gave a slow, deliberate nod. Together we banked the embers in the fireplace and made our way upstairs. In the hallway, we paused between our two bedroom doors. The door to my room, and the door to the guest room where she was staying. Without a word, I took her hand and led her into my room. It felt different now. The ghosts of my past selves seemed to have retreated, making space for something new. We didn't talk. The time for words was over. We undressed in the near dark, a silent, mutual shedding of armor. I watched the silhouette of her as she pulled her t-shirt over her head, the graceful curve of her back, the strength in her shoulders. There was no coyness, no hesitation. Just a simple, profound honesty. We slipped under the covers, the cool sheets a shock against our warm skin. For a moment, we lay on our backs, inches apart, not touching. Then, she rolled onto her side to face me, propping her head on her hand. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice a soft murmur in the dark. "I am now," I replied, and it was the truest thing I'd ever said. I reached out, my fingers tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her lips. She closed her eyes, leaning into my touch. And then, I leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't the desperate, frantic kiss I had imagined in the kitchen. It was soft. It was tentative. It was a question. She answered by deepening it, her hand coming up to cup the back of my neck, her fingers tangling in my hair. It was a kiss of recognition, of arrival. It tasted of tea and rain, and a hope so powerful it almost broke my heart. It was a promise that even after the most brutal demolition, you could find a place to rebuild. We spent the night learning the shape and texture of each other, a slow, tender discovery in the quiet dark. It wasn't about forgetting the pain of the past, but about creating something new and beautiful in its presence. When I woke up, the sun was streaming through the window, painting stripes of light across the bed. Lena was still asleep, her arm thrown protectively over my waist, her face peaceful. I lay there for a long time, just watching her breathe, memorizing the way the light caught in her dark hair. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my stomach for months was gone, replaced by a quiet, humming warmth. The fight with Sasha wasn't over. My life was still a mess. But looking at the woman sleeping beside me, I knew I had found my solid ground. My first concrete action was not to check my phone. It was to gently press a kiss to Lena's shoulder, a silent thank you. Later that morning, we were in the garden. The air was washed clean by the storm, and the whole world smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. I was on my knees, my hands deep in the soil, clearing the last of the weeds from the peony bed. Lena was a few feet away, pruning a climbing rose. I looked at her, her face focused in concentration, a small, serene smile on her lips, and my heart felt full to bursting. She looked up as if sensing my gaze, and her smile widened. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. We had moved beyond the need for constant words. I smiled back, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. The garden was still a work in progress. There were bare patches and stubborn weeds. But for the first time, I could see the peonies, strong and green, pushing their way toward the sun. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that they were going to bloom.